Okay, then I think because we have a lot of things to discuss today, it's about time that we get our web debate in November underway. For those regular to these web debates, you know that we meet on the first Tuesday of every month to discuss new and emerging issues in diplomacy and international relations, and to look at the kind of skills that the next generation of diplomats and the next generations of those working in international relations and international organizations need. The debates are organized by DiploFoundation in the context of the International Forum on Diplomatic Training. My name is Katharina Fröhne. I'm a researcher in diplomacy and global governance with DiploFoundation, and I have the pleasure to moderate our debate today. So for our November debate, we meet to discuss the topic blockchain for development, and we're going to look at a couple of interesting cases, but we'll also offer a critical assessment and some further reflections. Many of you will have heard of blockchain as this new technology that impacts our economic and social development. There has been quite some hype about one particular blockchain application, which is Bitcoin, but blockchain is also discussed in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's quite a wide range of things to discuss, and today we're going to focus on blockchain for development. For this debate, I'm joined by two experts who are going to share their perspective and going to share their examples, as well as their critical reflections and more general reflections on blockchain. So I'm joined by Mr. Dejan Dinčić, who is a specialist in digital transformation and online learning. And I'm also joined by Mr. Arvin Kamberi, who is, among many other things, a curator for e-money and digital currencies at the Digital Watch Observatory. Before I start the discussion with them, let me remind you that this debate is highly interactive. So we're looking for your questions, we're looking for your comments, which you can leave in the chat. I will look at the questions and comments and bring them into the debate as they fit, but also, specifically, we will reserve the last half an hour of our chat to specifically respond to your questions and comments and really enter into a debate with our online audience. So this webinar is specifically for non-technical experts. And as such, there's one key question we need to begin with, which is quite simply, what is blockchain and how can we best understand it? I mean, there are aspects of cryptography, immutability, network computers, which all seem to be important to understand. And in order to do that, I would like to start with you, Arvin, to give us a kind of, well, introduction to blockchain and kind of something that we can hold on to as we continue the debate.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks, everyone, for showing up today. And as Kat mentioned in her intro, well, the main question we will try to answer at the beginning is what is the blockchain? We heard a lot of applications of this new novel technology around the world, and of course, usually it's described in a single sentence, which means that blockchain is a distributed data ledger. What that exactly means is what we'll actually try to kind of shortly introduce now, in order to see what are the main features of one blockchain, as Kat mentioned, decentralization, immutability of data, and encryption, of course. And I always like to start from this particular slide. And I guess you all know this guy. I don't mean Kronenberg, or what is his name, but I mean the guy who's playing in this great film, Alan Turing, the father of modern cryptography, let's say. And indeed, it begins from the let's say beginning of cryptography, and the story of blockchain is actually continuation of digital data encryption and the digital data sending over the systems we envisage, such as an internet these days. As we know, until the 80s, encryption was highly specialized for organizations which are using it, like military, police, and others. But in late 80s and development of the World Network, World Wide Web later, most of the scholars were actually transponding these skills to digital data and trying to implement all of this encryption into this new digital age. That's why this monitoring is important. And of course, starting point for blockchains was conveniently exactly 10 years from today, from now, on 31st of October, as a continuation of this struggle to have an encryption over the internet, which will be, I'm going to say, perfect. Let's say not able to be broken. We witnessed a birth of a proposal, which is a proposal to a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, today known as Bitcoin. And even though this document does not explicitly say blockchain in it, undoubtedly this is the first document which is explaining what the blockchain is, and explain the concept of applied cryptography on an internet in order to transaction between two parties. What does exactly mean and why it was created? Since the creation of the World Wide Web and digital era, let's say, we all know that digital data is not scarce. It can be copied, it can be multiplied, it can be without any loss of quality, or it can be multiplied numerously, many times. Main, let's say, problem which was this paper was trying to solve is actually a problem known as a double spending. What that actually means that one digital data can only be transacted once or spent once on the digital networks or on the internet. Why is this important? As I said, as we know, like many of the electronic data can be copied and be transmitted, so there is no real abundance of, there isn't really no obscurity of digital data. What is the double spending problem? Let's say you have an e-money account, which means your regular bank money account, and you send 100 euros to Katarina, let's say, or Dan, for example. And at the same time, you send those 100 euros to another person. So in that kind of system, you would need a central body or a central authority to tell exactly which transaction goes first, and to prevent you to spend a double, to spend that amount twice. We rely for that on a central financial institutions or on a central institutions overall regarding data. What is Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin's white paper proposing, and what was the idea of blockchain? Is actually to eliminate third party, to eliminate a trusted service in the middle, which can say what is the real data in that particular moment. But how we can do that? We can do that only if everyone in the system knows everything which has happened from the start of that system. And that's basically under the technology of blockchain. Blockchain introduced something which is an security on the internet via hashing. What does exactly mean? It introduced a solution that data, digital data, can be put in a container, had a header on it, which will be hashed or encrypted, And that's how it's broadcasted on the internet. The next block of data would refer to the previous block of data by using the cryptographic function of hash. We usually present hash as something as a digital fingerprint. In that sense, we can create a chain of data contained in blocks, of course, and can, for 100% certainty, know that one data is generated from another, meaning that one data is following time and appendage is following time and appendage to the database. Why was this so important? As we said, in this way we eliminate a third party or a man in the middle who can actually vouch for one or another participant in a network, and we create a mathematical proof that the data in this kind of chains is not tampered. As you can see, this is also an excerpt from a Bitcoin blockchain white paper, and it's saying that it introduced this really nice solution, as I said, of blocks which containing items and hash which are connected one to another. This kind of data, in order to be legit and in order to be proper, is propagated around an internet and distributed on every computer which is participating in this kind of a system. Every system in this, every computer in this system has an exact same database which is running on its own computer, avoiding again a third party and avoiding the let's say middleman who can actually verify transaction. Transactions in the systems are verified mathematically. And what this actually means when I say distributed around the world, apart from different from a regular databases, which are mostly one computer which is sending information to everyone in the network, what is the current state of the network. In this case, we have a current state of the network recorded on every computer. So everyone knows, whoever is running a version of blockchain knows what happened in that blockchain. Why is this centralization important in this system? Because it improves the security of the system. Even if someone eliminates how it improves the security, it eliminates one point of failure, which was usually a servers or a central point from which the data was transmitted. And actually, in this case, you have thousands, hundreds, or even thousands of computers who run the same database and act as a server, let's say, for everyone. So even if you take down one point, there is another 11,000 who will exactly run the same database, which makes it almost impossible to take down this kind of databases. In this screenshot, you can see this is this morning's screenshot from a global Bitcoin nodes distribution. Bitcoin network is one of the largest blockchain networks on the world because, of course, it has a financial impact on everyone, and everyone wants to be part of it. And as you can see from this really recent today's screenshot, there are more than 10,000 nodes around the world who are running this version of software on their computer. In short, how blockchain transformed some kind of value or any kind of data, we can see on this illustration. In order to send someone something, any kind of data, this is particularly for the Bitcoin blockchain, but it works for any kind of digital data. you need to actually propagate your message or your transaction on the network. That transaction is put in a block. That block is propagated around the network. Everyone on the network saying it's okay to transfer this because you do have sufficient amount of money. After a certain period of time, that block is added to a blockchain and transaction is completed. This is a system of a global distribution of data. And I will start just here in order to take your questions if there are anything, or to leave Dan to say about it too.
Thanks, Arvin. So this gives us a kind of a basis from which to continue the discussion on this question of, so what is blockchain and kind of why does it matter? Dejan, is there anything you think needs emphasizing or anything to add here?
No, I think Arvin provided a very good overview and he covered all the main points of the concept and of how this works. Maybe just to try and present this in a zooming out and presenting this in very practical terms. In the end, a blockchain is a network. It's a network of computers around the world that run the same software, and they are one type of users of a blockchain or participants in a blockchain network, and then the other type is the end users who transact on each particular blockchain. So they have what we call electronic wallets or some other way to interact with the rest of the network. So what we have here is communities of people or users and a network. And that, I think, is also that's a very practical view of it. So there is a piece of software running on computers around the world. This software is most often open source, and I think that's one of very important ingredients of the blockchain system. And there's a piece of software, there's a network of nodes running this database, this distributed ledger around the world, and there is a community of users who are using it. So very practical perspective of what are the ingredients in a blockchain network.
Thanks, Dejan. For me, one of the key aspects when we look at blockchain is obviously this concept of immutability. And I think when we look at applications beyond cryptocurrencies and applications beyond Bitcoin, this kind of factor of immutability becomes really important. So to kind of bring us back to the main point of the discussion, which is around applications, and then zooming out the kind of implications of these various applications of blockchain, let me make a couple of comments on the SDGs. So nearly every single of the SDGs, the global goals, is discussed in relation to blockchain, in the sense that in one way or another, blockchain applications are discussed as a means of achieving the SDGs, or as a means of, well, implementing them, or achieving them, implementing them in some kind of more efficient or better way. There's a lot to talk about here potentially. I'm going to focus on three issues in particular, which is around digital identities, around education, and around managing supply chains. So digital identities, here we're looking at managing data effectively and empowering individuals to access public services. And this is often related to SDG 1 on fighting poverty in all its forms, and SDG 5 on gender. Then the second example, education. Here we're looking at blockchain applications to store education credentials and to prevent fraud. And this obviously in the context of SDG 4 on quality education. Third example I just want to quickly mention is managing of supply chains. And this is related to global commerce. And here again, the idea comes back, at least in my kind of non-technical view, to this concept of immutability. So again, blockchain is discussed as providing some way of providing a certification that cannot be tampered with. and a way of gaining additional efficiency. And in terms of sustainability, it is linked to sustainable consumption and sustainable production. So just looking at these three examples, we have quite a lot of applications. So throwing this back to you, what are your comments and thoughts on this? Because you're probably aware of a number of these applications, and you're also aware of the discussion related to the SDGs. So again, maybe starting with you, Arvin, what is your reaction when you hear these kind of examples and when you hear these kind of debates of blockchain applications for sustainable development?
Hi, Kat. Yes, thanks. They really sound good. They sound promising. They sound like something which is really at our grasp. But prior to just like, I would like also to show something in my presentation, especially, and here is about a blockchain possible application which are related to the SDGs or development overall. And I try to kind of point out here just things which are most promising and which can and already are enhancing some of the programs and efforts in even achieving SDGs, but in general development over the world. And I would like to kind of group them in three areas. And blockchains can and will already are really helpful. Of course, in economic, social, and environmental fields when we talk about development. Of course, I would just like shortly of every of this aspect. Let's start from the economic aspects and try to move to the rest. Well, obvious purpose and use case can of course be found in supply chains, financial services, and aid delivery. Why supply chains? Supply chains are the real use of blockchain so far, like most prominent real use of blockchain. Blockchain is massively transforming the world of supply chains. It is used by the biggest world companies, from Costco to others, and some of the benefits indeed are inclusion of the producers into supply chain. It's a real-time tracking of goods and data, and of course in a tamper-proof certification, which later is also related to inclusion of producers into supply chain. Regarding some of the offsets of a supply chain, of course, the quality of data which are put in a blockchain can be an issue, can be a challenge. And the second one is scalability. Most of the supply chains are global, and scalability of blockchains is a bit of a tricky one. When this kind of databases grow rapidly, they can experience significant slowdowns, etc. So scalability can be one of the issues in supply chains. Some of the global uses, let's say, and from the perspective in supply chains is, for example, to track the conflict-free diamonds, which we had in issuing a global certification. And that kind of supply chain run by blockchain is really working now, and it's a one useful user case. Another, financial services. Financial services are really kind of one of the most promising features of blockchain. Why? What's in it? It's of course offering inclusion in the global economy, and we know that financial inclusion and inclusive finance and those terms are really related to the not only sustainable development goals, but they are in the center of every development efforts from international organizations, from other parties in arena. We often heard that more than 2.2 billion people do not have a proper banking setting systems, do not have a proper money transfer near to them, or services, or anything which is related to them. How can they help blockchains in financial services? Of course, lower transaction costs, reducing time from transactions, adding additional liquidity for small, medium enterprises in development and undeveloped areas, and let's say some of the let's say things or bad issues about in financial services, of course, is a consumer protection in this particular moment. Another aid delivery, of course, increasing transparency, enabling new charity models, which can be related to the peer-to-peer charity or direct charity to some kind of organization. Again, no intermediaries, no high fee for transactions, etc. Of course, one of the setbacks is we need a massive adoption of crypto wallets, of crypto solutions, which are okay and safe to use. One of the interesting programs is, for example, for food program, which aims to reduce payment costs associated with cash transfers, protect beneficiaries' data, control financial risk, and I will try now to find it, and it's really nice. I will share the link with you later in a chat. And it says building blocks. Here it is. I will put it in a chat. It's one of the rule for program, which is already going and ongoing and had an impact. Move fast to the social area. Of course, media as one of the, let's say, one of the things that we need a help from the blockchain, if I can say that. Of course, new models of payment for the content, censorship resistance due to the decentralized nature of blockchains. It's great for the censorship resistance, publishing anything you want. But again, on a bad side, it's lawful takedowns might be really hard or even impossible. And new payment models still needs to be proven, but this is one of the promises for the media. Afterwards, public registries, of course, usual suspects, and most suitable candidates for blockchain's development. A bit harder to get, but highly valuable for our society. And the public registers are kind of, as you said, Katarina, due to the immutability of blockchains, are really a reasonable way forward. And third, and let's say most hard to achieve, is this notion of digital identities. Blockchain can help in privacy and data management, but in a self-sovereign way. I mean, we could be owners of our privacy, owners of our data. Blockchain can help us in actually deciding what to share, where to share, and with whom. But it must be in a self-sovereign way. It must be that everything is on us, let's say. No third parties to be accountable. Of course, identity in that way, with digital identities, identity theft would be like, let's say, would be a past, would not be possible to steal anyone's identity on the internet. And of course, it will help in create a different paradigm in data privacy, sharing, and such. Well, what's few setbacks? Of course, digital literacy, how to manage data, how to do things, access, conflicting laws, and of course, ethic issues and governmental regulation. Apart from this, on social level, blockchains can be used to enhance e-health, e-voting process, but this is far-fetched right now, but we will not spend much time on it. And of course, this is only if certain conditions are met. And at the end of the environment, of course, climate marketplace efficiencies, all kind of marketplace efficiencies. And that would be in a short. I would also like to show you here are a few online already working services which are tackling some of the user cases, as for the e-commerce, insurance, money transfer, real estate, distribution, supply chain, and health industry. All of this are currently working in promise blockchain development in this area. That will be it, please.
Okay, Arvin, thank you so much for these comments and the examples. Based on that, I would like to bring in Dejan, if you have any additional comments on these examples or similar ones, because it seems like there are applications, but also the question then is, how would you assess them, or what is your comment on what Arvin just described?
I wouldn't add any more examples. I think Arvin provided a really good list of examples. I would maybe comment on the discussions that are taking place in Geneva. So the diplomatic aspect, the development aspect, we know there are a lot of international organizations based in Geneva, and in recent weeks and months we have participated in a number of events in which blockchain for development is discussed. And on the positive side, it's good to see different stakeholders coming together and discussing something that is new and that is promising, and how this can be used for good, how it can be used for development. And we have a number of discussions where UN representatives sit together with civil society, with representatives from the industry. In that sense, it's very positive, and it's good that we have these discussions. And a number of scenarios proposed is really optimistic in trying to find a way to speed up SDGs. A lot of people are saying we are too slow in achieving these goals. Can blockchain help? And it's good to have those discussions. But as we aim to also provide critical assessment today, I would also bring up what I thought is maybe not sufficiently developed, or what is missing in these discussions. And what I've seen is often these discussions take very black and white approach. So there are people who say, yes, blockchain can solve all our problems, or most our problems, and there are people who say, no, we don't want blockchain for. And very often such discussions don't really rely on arguments. So there is not sufficient critical thinking, there is not enough thinking about the key properties of this technology that are different, that have empowering potential. Instead, discussions stay within this black and white approach. And I think that's lacking. It's partly fueled by media hype. I mean, there is obviously huge coverage, and there is a hype element to the current coverage of blockchain in the media. So that doesn't help, because it inflates expectations. But we know from the history of the international development cooperation that there have been several waves which were technology driven, and technology was considered to be the key point for the next step in development, and they didn't work well. So we should not forget these things. They should not block us from exploring new and emerging technologies. There is no reason for that. But we should not forget this, and we should not be carried away on pure enthusiasm and optimism. So we have to find a balance between being realistic and being efficient and being rational in using our resources and times when it comes to directing resources and effort into development efforts. We have to be rational about it without blocking the process and without blocking exploration. And I think it's not easy to find that balance today when you are bombarded with very strong headlines from every media channel that you open. I think that would be a kind of general comment on the whole trend, and again, without trying to block the process. There are some more concrete points, but maybe I give you the floor back, Katarina, so that we don't run out of time and that you steer us and you are following questions from the participants, so we can maybe respond to their questions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because time is running, and actually there are quite a number of things that I have in mind, and also quite a number of things that emerged in the discussion. But just picking up on your point about balance, so that on the one hand we have quite a hype associated with blockchain, on the other hand we should not forget to keep and develop a critical perspective. So with that in mind, there is one particular line of debate that emerges here in the chat, as well as on our YouTube channel, where this is also live streamed. And there are questions surrounding personal data. And I think, Arvin, you mentioned it in terms of data sovereignty and possibilities to design blockchain for keeping data sovereignty in mind. So basically, we have a number of comments who are concerned about personal data in blockchain. And then a number of comments who are wondering about the compatibility between blockchain and the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. And this kind of question of, is there a way of keeping in control of our data once we move to blockchain? And I think people have especially immutability in mind and a record that's going to be there forever. So I'm wondering, just looking at this point in the discussion, if you could add a couple of comments there.
Thanks, Kat. Yes, let's start with identities and data sovereignty. Let's say the promises of data sovereignty it's really big nowadays. It is one of the most discussed issues around the world. And not just regarding the blockchain, but overall cybersecurity and overall trust on the internet, and knowing that we have a technology which can provenly be immutable and actually kind of be a back for individual identities online. It is really hard to think, why don't we move this way? Why don't we do that? Why don't we embrace this kind of data processing on a blockchain? But blockchain is just a part of a network, as Dan said it. That network, we interact with our machines, and our machines are actually a vulnerable point. So the blockchain itself, in its construction, it will preserve the data. It will preserve the data indefinitely, and it's based on mathematics, and that's fine. But the devices we interact with that network and send the data to that network might be compromised, might be tampered, might be hacked at the end, and we might get in the situation that we don't have a proper data at the beginning, at the start of this process. What would actually digital identities mean? It will mean that any of us would own our own identity on the internet, but that puts a lot of pressure on us as a users. We still do not know how to handle, let's say, a more basic digital operation, like saving properly, sharing in the clouds, and etc. Not to mention that entire new level of our personal privacy. We are holding our keys, our private keys, encryption keys, etc. This system is not well, just to be honest. It is similar as with our taxes. I mean, we need to take care of our taxes. We all need to know what are our earnings, and then go through that and pay our taxes, etc. So we do self-solve in that process. We actually do that individually. And that's it, basically, around the world. There is no much processes in which it's so much on our shoulders, let's say. But this being so novel and still missing user interface, nice user interface programs with easy to use and intuitive softwares on the top, which can actually help us handling our personal data. Without that, we can be just like going through. We can go through mayhem, because it might produce inaccurate data created from tampered devices. So basically, when we talk about digital identities and e-voting related to that, or voting online, the main issue is actually not the preservance of data on a blockchain, but mostly the vulnerability of devices which will actually connect to the blockchain. So every one of us would need to be a kind of encryption expert to actually handle all this data safely, securely, without leaks. So we do need we lack this level of softwares, or let's say application level, on which we can easily send this stuff to the blockchain and interact with the blockchain, interoperability. And another as GDPR and the blockchains. Let's just remember GDPR's data provisions are started drafting 2011. Blockchain was not even there. We were concerned about the privacy of our data, and GDPR followed few basic steps in identifying data controllers, identifying people who are responsible for their personal data, putting something like geo-sovereignty, geolocation sovereignty. The European citizen data cannot leave the European Union, and I put it back. So it is not written with the blockchain on mind, but and now with the distributed nature of a blockchain, we have some problems in actually who is data controller, who processes this data, because everyone can see. I'm talking about public blockchains. Everyone can see their data, so this might be a bit tricky. And the third problem with GDPR and blockchains is, of course, this geolocation of data. As we saw on this map, nodes are around the world, so we cannot be sure which computer actually is running this database. So this is a just basic clash with GDPR, but I don't think I think that with few let's say setup, with few things which can be changed on a regulator side, on a technology side, these two technologies can even be compatible. Biggest issue in GDPR is, does obfuscation of data means deletion of data? Does additional encryption of data would mean that your data is almost deleted? And this is just a legal terms which I think the multi-stakeholder approach can work around that, and we can make a regulation into the GDPR who will be more specific to the blockchain. I hope I answered this too.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Arvin. There were also a couple of questions on fraud, on if blockchain is essentially fraud resistant, and I think you commented on that. And then also this big question when we talk about identities and voting in relation to blockchain and trust, and the need for people to trust in the system, which relates to another common question we had online, which is on education and the need to educate people on these kind of new technologies, for them, as you say, to be sovereign and to use them with knowledge and integrity and the ability to manage, for example, their identities online. What I would like to get to now is another very broad topic, which I think is really important, because as we said, blockchain applications are discussed in relation to almost all of the SDGs. So we have a number of interesting examples. For example, the World Food Programme using blockchain applications in food distribution. We have examples related to refugees and again food distribution. So we have, let's call them pilot projects, and we have quite a number of examples. But then the question that we need to raise is, why does the uptake of blockchain seems to be quite slow. The technology has been around for a couple of years now, and if you look at this development area and the social area, apart from cryptocurrencies, there seems to be some kind of lack or some kind of resistance, maybe. So I would be interested in hearing your comments on that. Why has the uptake of blockchain been relatively slow? Are there barriers? What's going on there?
Yes, I think there are a couple of reasons. I agree with you. I mean, compared to the expectations, there are very few large-scale applications that we can see taking off. So, what's the reason for that? I think one of the key reasons is the fact that distributed system like blockchain that allows different forms of governance, but it does not only allow and enable different forms of governance. I think it requires a different form of governance, and this is maybe part of the discussion of large-scale discussion that's missing, or it's not sufficiently developed. In some cases, we try to apply blockchain technology to the problems that can be better solved with other means, because they don't require this kind of thing. And when considering applying blockchain to a new domain, we really need to think about the context. So why decentralized solution? What is it going to bring to a particular context? Remember, in development, many issues, or majority of issues, are not technical. They are people issues, they are political issues, they are economic issues. So we have to understand the context in which we want to apply the blockchain. And we have to think, okay, what kind of governance model would work here that can be supported by blockchain? So I think that's one part of one of the reasons why we are not seeing faster uptake of this technology, because we don't pay enough attention to the social and governance aspects of the domains in which we want to apply blockchain. The other is the tricky nature of this technology in terms of complexity. We said this, the paper that started the whole thing that Arvin showed in the beginning, and majority of blockchain software is open source, so that means it's available, nominally available to anyone. It's open to public scrutiny, which is good for its security. It's also available for application. There are friendly websites where software developers can go enter a few parameters, configure and customize the blockchain, download and start running it, in theory. And that seems like a low barrier to entry. But at the same time, because they usually have sensitive data, they transact value, the data is sensitive. So it's not enough to just start with plain blockchain without considering security issues. That's on one side. So there is some complexity around it, which maybe doesn't allow all of us just to start a new blockchain when we think it could help. And then, as Arvin already pointed out in the other context, the endpoints. How do you transact with a blockchain? Do you have a user-friendly wallet on your computer, on a mobile phone, on a community kiosk? We don't have that yet. And these are rather complex because of the potential vulnerability and sensitivity of any hacks that could happen on them. So these are some of the reasons. But going back, so there are technical reasons which can be solved in various contexts, where you see a good case, when you have, I think, although it's primarily a decentralized system, I think in many cases we need sponsoring organizations that would not react the centralized authority part, but they could be sponsoring the effort, which can be considerable. But apart from the technical side, I think it's the considerations of the social context, it's consideration of the use case for a decentralized system, network, and the community around it.
Thanks, Dejan. Arvin, do you have anything to add there? And also to make your task a little bit more difficult, we had an earlier comment about this idea of blockchain as, not blockchain, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a scam. So if you could also include that in your response.
Yes, I would just like to add for what Dan just said, as I elaborated earlier at the beginning, it is a network, and as Dan rightly noticed, without a proper network, it's really hard to implement decentralized solutions. Without the proper way of how setting priorities in your network and what's the purpose of your network, it is really hard to have a working, functional solutions for a blockchain. Again, remember, we have to remember the blockchain does use encryption and a bit of a harder to understand rationale behind. And in order to use it massively, we need an endpoint solutions or user face or user solutions for the users and users in order to easily interact with these chains. Another one is, of course, as Dan mentioned, the importance of network. And just to tackle issue about cryptocurrency, and of course Bitcoin as the first one, this blockchain and cryptocurrency is actually a continuation of saga of this digital gold, digital values. We tried to establish it for years now. There's a group of experts, mathematicians, everyone just working on digital scarcity. And as a culmination of that, we had a blockchain. And of course, the first implementation was regarding to the financial system. Blockchain was envisaged 2009 in the midst of the big economic crisis, Lehman Brothers going down and everything. So this was a test network trying to create. This is a test network trying to create alternatives to the central banks or the central authority systems. That's why it was first used into the cryptocurrencies as a most obvious user case. Are they scam? I mean, they can be looked at it from different perspectives. Of course, looking at it from a system which is already set with the nice financial institutions, with the trusted parties, with democratic governments running financial institutions, with transparency in financial institutions, one can think that really we do not need an obscure internet money in order to everything to work. But we have to envisage another part of the world which do not have financial services, let's say in their near 10 kilometers from there or even 100 miles from there. And they want to participate in global internet. They do have websites. They sell maybe something over websites. They do sell services or, I don't know, rent rooms via Airbnb. So we needed some kind of universal internet good which people can be paid in. And in that sense, one universal internet money, let's call it like that, it would be really useful. Apart from moving it around the world and accessing it wherever you have an internet, you can access it. To the level of microtransactions, micropayment. As we see, this is a peer-to-peer system, and we often need let's say, peer-to-peer transaction, like personal, private, half-private, semi-private transaction in which I would like to particularly ping one person and send him something. So in that sense, it was a revelation for many, which, again, I'm saying, which are not a part of organized, trusted financial services we had in the West. That's the main purpose why they skyrocketed, actually.
Thank you.
If I can connect to the question Kat mentioned, and that was posted in the chat about the economist Rubini's reaction or his views of all cryptocurrencies being either a scam or unnecessary. There was testimony in front of the US Senate with Rubini and one other financial expert. And I wanted to answer because it's exactly the kind of, even one of the worst cases of black and white discussion. So if you listen to this, and this is available as a video recording of Rubini's testimony in front of the Senate, he provides some arguments, and it's good to question things. But then he falls back on the argument, it doesn't make sense, it's not going to fly. Now, you know, for an academic discussion or for a scientific investigation of something, to use the argument that it doesn't make sense and it's not going to fly, and to repeat it a couple of times in response to the counter-arguments is not very convincing. So I think it's good to always question things, and to question, especially to question things that are being hyped. But that's not the best, not the most argumented critique of the blockchain and cryptocurrencies I've seen, because it doesn't rely and doesn't go much into critical thinking.
I agree, and I think as we tried to do in this webinar, it's really important to strike a balance between the hype and the kind of idea of blockchain is going to solve all of our problems and help us implement the SDGs on the one hand, and the kind of dystopian vision where we're completely critical and don't see any value added. I think we need to very carefully investigate that. Looking at the time, I think our hour is unfortunately almost up. There's still a couple of questions that will have to remain open from the audience, such as questions on smart contracts, questions on how to prepare the next generation through education to navigate a world where blockchain is going to be a factor, and similar questions. In closing, I would like to invite both of you for maybe a final word or a final reflection on the things we've been discussing today. So let's start with Arvin, and then Dejan, just a final word, a final key point of reflection. Over to you.
Thank you, Katarina. I just wanted, I'm not sure, just shortly, there is one more question for Atef. I see it now in the chat. I'm not sure that we answer it, but let's go straight, just try to answer that, and I will then have some kind of conclusion. And Atef is saying we have millions of citizens live abroad and they have the right to vote. However, the majority of them can't vote elections due to many reasons. What requirements needed to use blockchain technology for secure and transparent elections? And I mentioned a bit earlier, but I'm not sure if this is clear enough, and would like to just point it out again. Regarding the e-voting and e-voting on blockchains, essentially, the problem is not in a blockchain. It's not in deployment of blockchain for, let's say, governmental offices or something like that. The problem with e-voting is the security of devices which we are voting for. For example, if you're required to vote via mobile phone, you live, I don't know, abroad, and you want to vote via mobile phone, the chances are that you can be hacked, or your voice can be reversed or wrongly casted, are 99% it's going to happen in your phone. So basically, the trustworthiness of data is the real problem, which is overall cybersecurity problem, of our devices. So even the ballot machines were proven in years and years in many hackathons that they can be rigged, hacked, casting wrong votes, etc. Even with the last election in the States, like a couple of months ago in Texas, GOP Republicans were claiming and declaring with proof that almost 30% of ballot machines were sending wrong votes, not the right votes, but have changed, altered one. So basically, the right question is the security of our devices and the security of central bases, not so much on a blockchain. And this can easily be distributed around the world. Government can easily have this tool for its assessment. But I can't it's about devices. And as a closing up, I would just like to say that and echo what Dan said it earlier, we should not just dismiss any of this solution because it looks like too much or too naive or even too far-fetched. We are here to discuss this kind of new governance on the internet because we have an open and free internet. And as soon as the internet is staying free and open, we will have new kinds of forms to interact, and we can move forward in some kind of a new social contract. So the important thing is to preserve the free and open internet, on which we can, of course, then work further. Thanks.
Thank you.
On my side, I would just say let's keep our critical thinking. Let's keep our minds open to new ideas, to new technologies. Let's make an effort to learn their empowering properties, even if we are not technical people, but to understand what difference can a new technology make, and see if we can use it for achieving SDGs and other developmental goals, while keeping a critical approach. I think that fine balance between the two extremes is what we should all aim to do. Thank you.
Thank you both. Two excellent conclusions, which actually not only conclude the debate, but also provide lots of food for thought. So on this note, let me first thank our participants for their questions, thoughts, observations, and further examples. But most importantly, let me thank you, Arvin and Dejan, for joining us today, for taking the time, and for sharing your expertise on the topic. As we can see, the debate is far from over, and it's going to be interesting to see where we go from here. Thank you so much.